после эры Трусова.
There's a new plot in Russian figure skating, just like in a long-running TV series, when old and beloved characters suddenly return for the next season. It seemed like the era of Trusova, Kostornaia, and Valieva was in the past. Sasha and Aleona became mothers, and Kamila was serving a doping ban. But no, they're back, and they announced it almost simultaneously. Seriously? Sasha Trusova isn't just returning, she's returning to Atari Tubbirds. She has serious plans. First, the Russian jumping championships in 2 weeks, and then a full season. This will be Trusova's third appearance with the Atari Tubbirds' team. In the spring of 2020, after 4 years at Krystalny, she left for Evgeny Plushenko, only to return exactly 1 year later. And after Beijing 2022, she tried out for Svetlana Sokolovskaya. Under Sokolovskaya's guidance, Trusova spent the final season of her career, albeit an incomplete one. She competed in a couple of Russian Grand Prix events, and withdrew from the 2023 Russian Championships for medical reasons. Sasha appeared at test skates in September 2024, preparing for them with Plushenko. But things didn't go well, neither her form nor her interests showed. Then Trusova and maker Ignatov had a son, leaving no time for sport. Even in the first episode of the Akko documentary The Tubbirds Method, it's clear that Sasha and Atari are doing just fine. Tubbirds kissed her on the top of her head and coddled little Misha. Trusova hasn't hidden the fact that she's training with familiar coaches. Recently she showed herself skating to Sergei Dudakov's commentary. So another comeback to the old coaching staff isn't particularly surprising. Trusova's form has also returned. She barely left the ice, even during maternity leave. First, there were the Plushenko shows, now Ice Age, and soon the Russian Ice Jumping Championship will be coming. Trusova's first competition since the fall of 2022. Sasha shared the details in her vlog. Trusova is only 21, it's all real. Tatiana Tarasova is delighted. Trusova is back. Wonderful. Of course, the tandem with Tubbirds can bring success again. Everything is going well for us. This is truly a great joy, because we want to see them. Kamila Valieva is also ready. Her sentence for testing termitazidine expired at the end of December 2025. The 4-year saga is behind her, there will be no new trials. And this means Kamila needs to start a new chapter. She'll already be making her debut at the Russian Ice Jumping Championship. Yes, with Trusova. But that's not all, Kamila will even show a new program at the Channel 1 Cup in March. Friends, I have news for you, I'm returning to the big ice. Of course, I'm very excited, but I'm even more looking forward to feeling the competitive thrill again at the Russian Ice Jumping Championship. And I'll be debuting one of my new programs at the Channel 1 Cup. It will be a special occasion for me. I'd like to invite you to join me on this journey, as your love and support have become my most powerful source of motivation. We'll be meeting in person in various cities, where I'll be able to chat with you and conduct master classes for everyone. Let's prove together that kindness, support, and love for your craft always pay off. Valieva is currently training with Svetlana Sokolovskaya at Tatiana Navka's school. She announced this new partnership in October. Kamila last competed at the 2024 Russian Championships, winning bronze, which was later stripped due to disqualification. There's a lot of catching up to do, but Valieva is already rehabilitating her quadruple toe loop, and a triple axel is on the horizon. Sokolovskaya assures us that everything is serious. She has a huge desire to compete, and she's worked hard to make it happen. And Tarasova is, as usual, delighted. I was very happy with this news. I'm thrilled. I don't know what form Kamila is in right now, because I haven't been to her practices. But I assume she's gotten into shape. Otherwise, I doubt she would have applied. I think she has a lot to show for herself on the ice. 2020 European champion Aleona Kostornaia is ending her career break, which she took a year ago due to maternity leave, but now she's almost on a new team. Kostornaia and Georgy Kanitsa, a pair in real life and on the ice, announced their transfer to Evgeny Plushenko. However, Sergei Razlikov, their previous coach, will remain their main coach. Plushenko will handle the jumping content, Razlikov the pair's elements. And the process is indeed underway. Aleona and Georgy recently demonstrated how they practice quadruple throws. This is Kostornaia's second time coaching Plushenko. Her previous stint, in 2020, almost alongside Trusova, ended with a return to Tubbirds a year later. But for now, Aleona is in a positive mood. We're starting the morning with good news. We're joining the Angels of Plushenko Academy this season. We're happy to be staying with our coaches. And one of our mentors will be a legend, an idol, and a long-timer in the sport, Evgeny Viktorovich Plushenko. We believe our sporting partnership will be rich and exciting. P.S. After 5 years, I'll be returning to the familiar confines of Angels. But this time with my husband and son, and to a familiar team. And Evgeny is full of slogans. Bon voyage, youth, talent, desire, faith. The road will be mastered by the one who walks it. We're working hard. At their most recent Russian championships, Kostornaia and Knitsa finished ninth. There's definitely room for improvement. Trusova is once again excited, but reservedly. It's exciting. I believe they'll return to competition. Aliona is the kind of girl. What she says, she does. It's funny that the transfer was announced almost simultaneously with the comebacks of Trusova and Valieva. There's been a strong stream of comebacks. All that's left is for Anna Shcherbakova to remember tournaments and switch to, say, Sofia Fichenko, then the combo will be complete. And the new season is sure to be interesting.
Anna Shcherbakova это good choice, то есть это best choice.
A comeback not only for skaters, but also for coaches after the mass emigration of the 1990s. In the 1990s, figure skating in Russia developed largely in spite of itself. Rigs were closing, there wasn't enough money to maintain those that remained, and coaches naturally emigrated to more lucrative destinations. The United States became the most popular destination. There was both a clear demand for experienced professionals and a huge market for ice shows, where young former athletes could earn money. Even those who weren't planning to move permanently preferred to train their students abroad. Tatyana Trusova, for example, said that it was this decision that gave her 3 Olympic champions. In the mid-2000s, the situation began to change. Alexander Zhulin began visiting Russia more frequently, and Trusova finally returned. The return migration continues to this day. In 2023, Anzelika Krylova began coaching in Moscow, and 2 of her duets already made the podium at the 2026 Russian Championships, followed by Natalia Linichuk. One of the major comebacks, however, was only appreciated 10 years later. Eteri Tuberdz's return to Russia was more difficult than others. No one was willing to provide a ring for a new coach. But after the Sochi Olympics, everyone certainly knew about her. Evgeny's attempts to make a name for himself, a fashionable word in Russian figure skating, in show business and coaching, somewhat obscured his athletic successes, especially for fans who joined after 2014. But those who cheered for Plushenko in Turin 2006 are unlikely to forget the steely confidence with which he pounded his jumps into the ice in Tosca and The Godfather. Competitive drive never terrified him, on the contrary, it energized him and inspired others. The decision to include Plushenko in the Sochi Olympic team event, bypassing Russian champion Maxim Kovtun, was controversial, but the motive was perfectly clear. There was much more faith in Evgeny's clean performance. The next generation legend, Yuzuru Hanyu, drew inspiration for one of his programs from Plushenko's old free skate, and Russia hasn't won a men's world championship gold medal without Evgeny for 20 years. Figure skating is inherently a dangerous sport, but in pairs, the risk is multiplied. Any mistake on a lift can result in a fall of more than 2 meters. Any poor throw sends you hurtling down to the ice at breakneck speed, with no chance to regroup. Rebuilding your health after an injury requires not only rebuilding your partner's trust, but also the trust between them. The latter is sometimes more difficult. Tatyana Tmayanina's fall from a lift at the 2004 Grand Prix will be remembered by many as one of the most horrific tragedies on ice. The skater lay motionless, her partner Maxim Marinin and worried coach Oleg Vasiliev, who had reached the ice before the paramedics, stood frozen nearby. Their reaction caused the spectators in the arena to assume the worst outcome. At the hospital, it was discovered that Tmayanina had miraculously escaped with bruises and a concussion. She made a remarkable recovery and was back in lifts just 20 days after the fall. The fateful lift, however, took longer to recover. Vasiliev hired a psychologist for the pair and worked extensively with his partner, who blamed only himself for the incident. Any return to the sport after such a fall would have looked like a success. Tmayanina and Marinin took to the ice that same season, winning the European and World Championships, and the following year capped their careers with a stunning Olympic victory. If you're looking for a constant in Russian figure skating in the 2000s, it's Irina Slutskaya. She won 7 European Championships, more than any other female singles skater in history. She competed in 3 Olympics, winning medals in 2 of them. She continued her career amid a constant battle with vasculitis, a rare autoimmune disease that affects the walls of blood vessels, making it virtually incompatible with professional sports. Russian women's dominance in women's skating has become commonplace, but in reality, it's only lasted 12 years, and that's including a 4-year ban during which head-to-head competition with foreigners is impossible. Slutskaya's reign lasted just as long. Only twice, in her debut senior season and during a relapse of her illness, did she drop out of the top 5 at World Championships. In a quarter of a century, Russia has hosted only 2 World Figure Skating Championships, in 2005 and 2011. By comparison, Canada and the United States have hosted twice as many, while Japan has hosted the event 5 times. In fact, the 2011 World Championships were also planned for Nagano, not Moscow. But 10 days before the competition, Japan was struck by the most powerful earthquake in the country's history. The ISO paused to consider the matter, and then finally announced the cancellation of the tournament. The championships were initially planned to be rescheduled for the fall to give the new host country minimal preparation time. Russia saved the situation by offering to resolve all issues within a month, instead of the usual 2 years, an incredible amount of time, given visa requirements and the arena's occupancy rate. Just days before the start of official training, the ice at Megasport hadn't yet been filled. But everything was in place. The most spontaneous world championships in history was every bit as good as those prepared for years. This was the very competition that Russia lobbied the IOC to host the Games. A controversial and rather artificial tournament, but with minimal competition and a virtually guaranteed chance of a medal. It seems all the luck had been squandered on Sochi. In Pyeongchang, there was a disappointing silver medal, and in Beijing, a doping scandal that converted the gold medal, which was never awarded, into bronze. However, this doesn't negate the beauty of the 2014 victory. Russia won by 10 points, Plushenko and Tubberud celebrated side by side, and the general public learned about Yulia Lipnitskaya for the first time. This would cost her dearly in the individual competition, but the girl in the red coat became a star precisely after she gave her all to the team. While Lipnitskaya was learning to cope with the fame that had befallen her, Sotnikova, on the contrary, tried to channel her athletic anger into results. She was not allowed to compete in the team competition, either due to a lack of consistency or because of an informal reservation regarding permitted substitutions in pairs events. After the Olympics, Adelina recalled that almost no one in the stands recognized her. Casual fans were convinced that Russia had only one strong representative, Lipnitskaya. Sotnikova skated at her best and won the most unexpected gold of those games. Junior dance duos are often viewed with skepticism. Many of them never outgrow their teenage successes. A number of factors must come together for a duo to survive adolescence. Ideal anthropometry, shared career priorities, and, most importantly, a matched personality. Ilinik and Kosalapov were quickly labeled child prodigies. Sensuous, technical, and powerful beyond their years, they won the 2010 World Junior Championships by 16 points. By comparison, even Yuzuru Hanyu managed to beat his closest rival by only 11 points in the men's event. The pair's final was as spectacular as their rise. They won 2 medals at the home games, but almost immediately broke up, continuing their careers with new combinations. A curious detail. Today's top ice dance team is so mature that Ilinik and Kosalapov could theoretically still be among them. Alina is younger than 4 of the 5 leading contenders for the Olympic podium.
Вот у меня был паттерн определенной программы. Вот я вот всю жизнь его и катала. Он у меня флип-тулуп, луц, вращение.
Evgenia Medvedeva began her senior career 11 years ago. She took silver at her home Grand Prix, losing to Elena Radionova, and then went unbeaten for 2 years in a row, until that pre-Olympic Euros, where she arrived after a hastily healed stress fracture. According to skating scores, Medvedeva shares first place with Nathan Chen for the longest unbeaten streak in her career, 13 wins. Those were 2 seasons of total dominance. Xenia defeated the Americans at their home World Championships, won the Euros with an extra jump combination, and taunted her rivals at the Russian Championships with a deliberately executed jump for the zero. It was likely this superiority that ultimately weakened her vigilance. The opportunity to increase the complexity of her content was missed, and by the Olympic season, she had neither the strength nor the health left. Medvedeva lost the most important competition of her career to Lena Zajatova, but she will certainly be remembered as a model of remarkable consistency in women's skating. After the home games in Sochi, the 2018 Olympics were a painful blow for Russian fans and athletes. Earned quotas were replaced by invitations from the IOC, some were turned away without explanation, and their flag and anthem were banned. The national team arrived in Pyeongchang with a reduced and weakened roster. This even affected the figure skaters, with the pairs and ice dance teams banned. Russia, not formally represented at the Games, won only 2 gold medals, in hockey and women's skating. Despite this, Zajatova's victory did not spark universal joy, but rather controversy that lasted for years. Tatiana Tarasova cried live on air. Maxim Trenkov openly admitted that all the athletes were rooting for Medvedeva, and Eteri Tubberud, trying to cheer up the silver medalist, gave birth to the both gold meme. But the global war between fans of the 2 medalists began later, and Zajatova's 4 minutes of free skate in Pyeongchang were truly spectacular. Her content, the strongest of its time, forced the ISU to impose restrictions on jumps in the bonus zone, and consider introducing an age limit, although the initial lobbying for reform failed. Alina attracted brands and sponsors and even charmed the Japanese Prime Minister. He ceremoniously presented her with a dog. Figure skating has seen its share of spectacular duels. Brian Boitano vs. Brian Orser, Evgeny Plushenko vs. Alexei Yagudin, Tessa Virtue and Scott Moore vs. Meryl Davis and Charlie White. They often competed in their own league at tournaments, with the others only having to share the bronze. The emergence of a trio of absolutely equal strength, especially under the same coach, is a remarkable phenomenon. Each of the Trusova Shcherbakova Kostornaia trio could have become stars of the year, but even more astonishing is the fact that they exploded simultaneously. This coincidence deprived Sasha, Anya, and Aliona of some potential titles, and significantly shortened their careers, but it gave figure skating several years of astonishing struggle, at the very limits of technical ability. The fierce competition nurtured their individuality. Each fought to be an independent entity, not just part of a unique trio. Trusova surpassed the guys in technical difficulty, Kostornaia, from the age of 14, amazed with her precocious skating, later enhancing it with a triple axel, and Shcherbakova dominated with her balance and nerves of steel. Quads arrived gradually in men's skating. In 1988, Kurt Browning landed the first whole loop, and 10 years later, Timothy Gable discovered the Salchow. A full 13 years passed before the next Ultra C, the Lutz, landed by the little-known American Brandon Ross. Then the process accelerated slightly. In 2016 alone, thanks to Japanese skaters Yuzuru Hanyu and Shomu Uno, the loop and flip were unlocked, and in 2022, Ilya Malinin landed the final quad, the axel. For women, it's a different story. After Miki Ando's Salchow in 2002, nothing happened for 16 long years. While triple axels were more or less manageable for women, progress in quads stalled. Alexandra Trusova became a revolutionary. She was the first to successfully land a toe loop, Lutz, and flip in competition. Trusova increased not only the variety of her jumps, but also their quantity. Her free skate at the Olympic test skates was her peak. She completed 5 clean quads. At the Olympics, the number was the same, but the quality of her execution suffered, which ultimately cost Sasha gold. Russia has cultivated an image of a country that prioritizes jumps over programs in figure skating. We've always supported reforms that increase the cost of Ultra C jumps, launched a quad revolution for women, and tried to refocus skaters like Mikhail Klyata on complex content. Athletes usually travel to the US, Canada, or Europe to achieve masterpieces, to Shailin Bourne, Benoit Turcot, and the Montreal Dance Academy. But over the past quarter century, Russia has created many programs that have become iconic, and not only domestically. Yagudin's Winter, a production that combined rare music, a memorable costume, and Alexei's incredible charisma. The sequence still captivates audiences at ice shows, and signature gestures like the snowflung shard have migrated to programs of the next generation. Girl in a red coat, the symbol of the Sochi Olympics. Unlike Winter, this production uses fairly typical figure skating music, but for the first time, the plot of Schindler's List was told from the perspective of a minor character, and it was Lipnitskaya's interpretation that became iconic. White Raven, a program by Ilya Averbik, which you likely didn't initially count on. There are many reasons for this. Mikhail Klyata, a performer who had already passed the peak of his career, music that was new to ice, and a complex subject matter. Nevertheless, the production was quickly hailed as a masterpiece. Klyata firmly established himself as a talented artist, and international figure skaters also began to turn to Nurev's story. Eteri Tuberts rarely allows herself to cry in public, but in December 2020, after Shcherbakova's performance, she broke down. Yesterday, before the short program, Anya was dizzy, and she was feeling so bad that I knew she wouldn't be able to finish the free skate in that condition. Shcherbakova was repeatedly asked to withdraw during the competition or not to compete at the Russian Championships at all. A bout of pneumonia she had suffered in the fall led to complications, and there was no practical point in performing. The cancellation of the European Championships due to the pandemic was known in advance, and even the national title was hardly a sufficient argument. Anna already had that. The result was arguably the most heartfelt performance of her career, and scores for the free skate exceeding the world record. Tuberts sums it up with one word: overcoming. And this, perhaps, is truly Shcherbakova's superpower. Praise from a foreigner usually carries a slightly higher value, due to his freedom from patriotism or the popular notion that everything foreign is always better. Russian figure skaters have been the object of admiration quite often this century. Matthew Bellamy thanked Alexandra Trusova for choosing his music, and Yasmin Levy thanked Alina Zagitova. Steven Spielberg praised Yulia Lipnitskaya for her subtle interpretation of Schindler's List. Eteri Tuberts compared the importance of this moment to winning Olympic gold. Pablo Picasso's granddaughter admired Kamila Valieva's short program, inspired by Girl on a Bowl. Ben Stiller was impressed by Mark Kondratyuk's Olympic performance. Russia has always dominated the European Figure Skating Championships. Its main competitors, Japan, USA, Canada, compete at the Four Continents Championships. But such success as in 2020 hasn't been seen in 25 years. 10 of the 12 medals up for grabs went to Russia, including, of course, all the gold. It wasn't just the overall standings that were celebrated, but also the individual titles. The men's gold medal was the first in 8 years, thanks to the excellent performances of Dmitry Aliyev and, of course, the retirement of Javier Fernandez, who also ended his career and reigned as the dominant force in Europe. Victoria Sinisina and Nikita Kasalapov's victory in ice dance was a sensation. Gabriel Papadakis and Guillaume Cizerin had won the title 5 times in a row. Perhaps this outcome of the first quarter of a century will hurt hardcore fans. They are skeptical of any show business intrusion into their favorite sport. But for figure skating itself, this is a landmark achievement. From a niche discipline with complex rules and a high barrier to entry, especially compared to, say, track and field, it has transformed into a major part of popular culture. Film and TV series characters are now being put on skates. A couple of years ago, The Last Axel was released, in 2008, Hot Ice, and in 2025, the biopic Kostornaia. The musical drama Ice even expanded to 3 parts, despite its absurd plot from a sporting perspective. The 2000s ushered in the era of TV shows about celebrities paired with figure skaters. The most famous of these, Ice Age, is still running and has even spawned side versions: children's, folk, and dance. After their careers, the most enterprising champions find a new niche on screen, participating in shows, hosting them, or trying their hand at commentating. Moreover, figure skating proved an ideal source of gossip columns. The emergence of Yana Rudkovskaya is another logical outcome of the year. While long careers were commonplace during the Slutskaya era, Tamasheva's rise can certainly be called a phenomenon. She competed in 15 Russian championships, a record she shares with Sergei Voronov and Konstantin Menshov. At her most recent Russian championships, Tamashev competed against girls 10 years her junior, a remarkable achievement for women's skating. The most valuable aspect, however, was that Liza only blossomed with each passing year. She increased the complexity of her routines. At 18, she complained that the triple axel was ruining her concentration on other elements, but at 26, she was jumping 2 in her free skate. She experimented with her routines. From a disco-style skater, she grew into a wonderful, versatile artist. Alexei Mishin called his student the Statue of Liberty for figure skaters over 20. Tamashev has never been to the Olympics, but she has made everyone proud on numerous occasions, and when she won silver at the World Championships, returning there after 6 years, it was impossible not to cry along with her. Pair skating is the most difficult discipline to develop. It's no coincidence that Japan, a country so incredibly successful in singles, only won its first World Champions in 2023, though it's difficult to assess how much of a role the Russian band played in this. The United States is aiming for Olympic gold in 3 disciplines, and only in pairs is it missing even the top 5. During the ban, comparing the level of our pairs with foreign ones has become more difficult. One can only rely on technical performance. But here's a telling detail. Even now, when Russians are formally not represented at world tournaments, there are many familiar names on the ice and at the boards. European champion Nikita Volodin began representing Germany less than 3 years ago. His coach, Dmitry Savin, works in Sochi and, in addition to the Germans, trains several other foreign duos, including, for example, Hungarians Maria Pavlova and Alexei Svyatchenko, who also represented Russia early in their careers. European medalists Anastasia Medelkina and Luka Berlova are coached by Pavel Slysarenko, the face of the Perm school. The new Armenian duo, Karina Akapova and Nikita Rachmaninov, who immediately qualified for the Olympics, also train in Russia after changing their citizenship. Tatyana Tarasova's coaching career by the late 2000s was reduced to occasional collaborations. She worked with Mao Sada, choreographed programs for Evgeny Plashenko's arch-nemesis, Ivan Lysacek, and also took a consulting position with the Russian Figure Federation. Fortunately, Tarasova quickly found a new role. It turned out her talent as a commentator was as good as her coaching skills. Behind the microphone, she was always scathing and uncompromising. She could praise the program of a skater in the 20s and criticize a top athlete for poor form or nervous performance. The coverage of the women's free skate in Pyeongchang, for which Tatyana Anatolyevna received a TIFI award, was considered a failure by many, who accused her of blatantly favoring one Russian over another. But now, in an era of refined, inoffensive commentary, one increasingly wants to hear her subjective analysis, yet one that is filled with a passion for her sport.